Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? Today, we're going to be tackling decentralization.
Yeah, decentralization.
It's like everywhere these days.
It is.
Right. But what does it actually mean? You know, especially with all the blockchain buzz.
Well, and what's so interesting about it is that it's not just like a tech thing. We're talking about like power, right? Who controls information?
Yeah.
It gets kind of philosophical.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the research that you sent over,
Oh, yeah.
it's like looking into a kaleidoscope. All these like vibrant and sometimes like clashing ideas about decentralization, blockchain, AI.
For sure.
We've got decentralization, blockchain, and AI, challenges and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
That one's a deep dive into like how these forces intertwine. Then there's Bitcoin and blockchain, a cheat sheet for the crypto curious, and that's like laser focused on blockchain's effect on like ownership, especially in like finance.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and we can't forget AI agents. That one gets into like the ethics of like artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
And how we might like govern these digital entities in the future.
Super important stuff.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
But that's what we're here for, right?
Exactly.
To give everybody the
cliff notes.
Yeah, the cliff notes.
Yeah.
The golden nuggets of knowledge that it would take you hours to like dig up yourself.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Okay, let's just like start with the basics.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is decentralization?
Right.
Like we hear it all the time, thrown around all the time, but like what does it actually mean in practice?
Okay, so imagine a world where like Facebook doesn't control all your data.
Okay.
Or where app developers aren't like beholden to Apple's App Store rules.
Okay.
That's kind of the essence of like decentralization, like moving away from these like centralized power structures where one person or one entity like calls all the shots.
Okay, so instead of having like one company or one government that has all the power, it's like spread out among many different players.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, so think of it like the difference between like a traditional corporation where you have the CEO at the top, right, making all the decisions, versus like a worker-owned cooperative where everyone has a say, has ownership.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's more distributed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But where does blockchain fit into all of this?
Right.
Is it like the magic bullet that makes this all possible?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would say blockchain is more like the engine that kind of drives decentralization.
Okay.
It's a system that's built on a few like core principles.
Okay.
So first you have distributed control.
Okay.
So instead of having like a single server storing information, like blockchain uses a network of computers.
Okay.
And each of those computers has a copy of the data.
Got you.
So there's no like single point of failure or like control.
So it's like having like 1,000 backups of a file, but it's spread out across the whole internet.
That's a really good analogy.
Okay, cool.
So then the next thing is like cryptographic security.
Right.
And this makes tampering with the data almost impossible.
Okay.
So like every transaction that happens is encrypted and it's linked to the one before it and the one before that.
Right.
So it creates this like immutable chain of records, almost like a digital fortress protecting the information.
So blockchain sounds like it's like incredibly secure.
It is very secure, yeah.
But one of the articles that you sent mentioned this idea of consensus mechanisms. What are those and why are they important?
So consensus mechanisms are like the brains of the blockchain.
Okay.
They're the rules that determine how the network agrees on what's true.
Gotcha.
So imagine like a group of people trying to decide where to go to dinner.
Right.
You need a way to come to a consensus, right?
Yeah. And depending on the group, that can be interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does a blockchain reach consensus without like turning into a chaotic dinner party?
Right.
So there are a couple of different ways.
Okay.
One is like proof of work.
Okay.
This is where like computers are competing to solve complex math problems.
Okay.
And the first one to find the solution gets to like add the next block to the chain.
Gotcha.
This is how Bitcoin works.
Okay.
And it takes a lot of energy.
I was going to say, I've heard about like Bitcoin mining
Right.
and how it has a big like environmental impact.
Yeah, that's a big
That's been like a topic of discussion.
huge topic. Yeah.
Are there other consensus mechanisms that like aren't as energy intensive?
There are. Yeah. So there's proof of stake.
Okay.
This is where like users stake their own cryptocurrency to validate transactions.
Okay.
So basically, like, the more you stake, the higher your chances of being selected to add the next block.
So instead of burning at like energy, you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
To kind of secure the network.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, you know, there are other consensus mechanisms being developed all the time.
Okay.
The point is, these mechanisms are essential for ensuring the integrity and security of the blockchain.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to get like the technical side of things.
Yeah.
But like, why should I care?
Right.
Like, why should the average person, why should I care about like decentralization and blockchain?
Yeah, that's the big question, and it's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
So one of the key promises of decentralization is like greater ownership and control over your like digital life, right?
Yeah.
So imagine actually owning your data,
Okay.
owning your creative works, owning your online identity without having to like rely on these big tech companies as intermediaries.
So it's like taking back control from like the Facebooks and Googles of the world.
That's it.
That's a pretty appealing idea, I have to admit.
It is. And it's not just about data. Think about like the potential impact on like creative industries.
Okay.
So musicians could actually sell their music directly to their fans.
Okay.
Without like a record label taking a huge cut.
Right.
Artists could create digital art that's truly like unique and owned by the purchaser.
Okay.
Thanks to like things like NFTs.
Okay, so we're talking about like cutting out the middleman.
Yeah.
For all sorts of transactions.
Yeah.
Like, could I buy a house from the seller using blockchain?
Yeah.
Without like needing real estate agents and lawyers and all this stuff?
That's exactly where it's headed.
Really?
That's the power of like smart contracts, right?
Okay.
So these are like self-executing agreements that are written in code and stored on the blockchain.
Okay.
So imagine a world where you can automate everything from like rental agreements to supply chain logistics, making the whole process much more efficient and transparent.
Okay, you definitely got me interested. But, you know, the research also like mentions some potential downsides to like blockchain and decentralization.
Absolutely.
For example, one of the articles mentions diseconomies of scale. What does that even mean? And why should we be like concerned about it?
So it's kind of ironic, but while decentralization is great for like distributing control, it can also lead to inefficiencies. Right? So when you need to have everyone like to make a decision on a large network, things can slow down considerably.
So too many cooks in the kitchen can spoil the broth.
Right, even if all the cooks are well-intentioned.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And let's be honest, the centralized platforms we use every day, like Google, Amazon, they're incredibly convenient.
They are.
They've spent billions of dollars making these systems, like, super easy to use.
Right.
Decentralized systems often have a much steeper learning curve.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I just want things to work. I don't want to have to understand, like, the technology behind it.
Right.
But I also, you know, value my privacy.
Right.
I want more control over my data, so
absolutely.
It seems like there's a trade-off there.
There always is. There always is. That's why it's so crucial to have these conversations and really explore the nuances of this whole decentralization thing.
Yeah.
It's not like a perfect solution. But it has the potential to reshape the digital landscape in pretty profound ways.
Speaking of reshaping the landscape,
yeah.
What about the intersection of blockchain and AI?
Ooh, good question.
Can those two technologies even work together? Or are they, like, fundamentally at odds?
Right. That's a question a lot of people are grappling with right now, and it's something we're going to dig into in the next segment.
All right, stay tuned to find out if blockchain and AI are a match made in heaven or a tech tango gone wrong.
Or a tech tango gone wrong. Exactly.
Welcome back, everybody. We were just talking about blockchain and how it has the potential to change everything.
Yeah, from music to real estate.
Yeah, but can it work with AI?
Right.
Those seem like very different things to me.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on like one of the most, I guess, fascinating and potentially tricky areas in this whole like decentralization discussion.
Okay.
On the surface, they kind of seem like an odd couple, right?
Right. Because AI loves data.
Yeah.
It loves big data.
Yeah.
And like the more the better.
Right. It wants it all.
Yeah. It's like centralizing information to make these algorithms smarter and smarter.
Exactly. Exactly.
But blockchain is all about like distributing that control.
That's right.
So how do those two things even work together?
Right. And that like inherent tension, is why combining them is so like complicated.
Right.
Like some people think that fully decentralized AI is like the holy grail.
Okay.
But it hasn't really panned out.
Okay.
At least not yet, right? Think about something like federated learning.
Good.
This is where the idea is to like train AI models on data that's spread across like lots of different devices, but without that data ever leaving those devices.
Okay, so like instead of all my data going to like Google's servers,
right,
the AI comes to my phone, but my info stays on my phone.
That's the idea.
Okay.
It's great for privacy.
Right.
But it's really hard to make it work.
At scale.
Yeah, at scale. Like, imagine trying to coordinate this massive AI training process across millions of devices.
Yeah.
All with like different processing power.
Right. Different like internet speeds.
Exactly. Yeah. Connectivity.
Yeah.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So maybe like fully decentralized AI is
a ways off.
It's a ways off. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the research mentions this idea of decentralized AI with like a capital D.
That's right.
What is that about?
So this is where things get like a little bit more realistic.
Okay.
And honestly more exciting in the short term, I think.
Okay.
So think of it like the open source movement in software.
Okay.
So imagine a world where these like AI algorithms and data sets aren't like locked away in these big tech companies, but are open for anyone to like inspect, modify, improve.
So instead of trying to like eliminate centralization completely, we're kind of like shifting the focus to like transparency and collaboration.
Exactly.
So it's like crowdsourcing AI development.
Yeah, you could think of it like that.
Okay.
And this approach has already yielded some like really impressive results.
Oh, really?
Remember the article about Llama, the open source large language model? So this has been like catching up to ChatGPT in terms of performance. Right. And it's developed by this community of researchers, developers, not a giant corporation.
That's pretty amazing. So by making like AI development more open, we could actually accelerate innovation and create alternatives to like the big tech AI monopolies.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope.
Yeah. And blockchain can play like a vital role in this like open source AI ecosystem, It can help ensure like the integrity and traceability of data, algorithms. It makes it easier to like trust the outputs of these decentralized AI systems.
Okay, so it sounds like we're really just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, for sure.
Of what's possible with like blockchain and AI.
Absolutely.
But before we get like too carried away with like future possibilities, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something a little bit more concrete.
Okay.
AI agents.
Right.
That still kind of sounds like science fiction to me.
I know, it does have that kind of like futuristic ring to it.
Yeah.
But the reality is like closer than you might think. So AI agents are basically like software programs that can act autonomously. So they're making decisions, taking actions based on like their programming and the data that they're fed.
Okay, so we're not talking about like robots taking over the world.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But are we talking about like self-driving cars?
Yes.
Chat bots that like answer customer service questions, maybe even like algorithms that manage our investments?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, and as these AI agents become more sophisticated, it raises some like serious ethical questions.
Yeah, like how do we even make sure they're acting in our best interest?
Right, exactly.
Like who's responsible if an AI agent makes a mistake?
Right, who's liable?
Yeah, and it causes harm.
Yeah, huge questions.
And those are big questions.
Huge, and the research like dives into some potential solutions for this.
It does, and one of the papers talks about this idea of AI governance. Is that basically like creating a rule book for robots?
It's more than just a rule book. I think it's about like really embedding ethical considerations into the very like design of AI systems.
Okay.
So one approach that's mentioned in the research is this ethos framework, and it really emphasizes like aligning AI goals with human values.
Okay.
Right? And it also proposes categorizing AI agents based on like their level of autonomy and potential impact.
Okay, so like a self-driving car would be in a much higher risk category than like a chatbot that recommends movies on Netflix.
Exactly, because the self-driving car has the potential to cause like physical harm.
Right, exactly.
Right, so and the level of like oversight, regulation would correspond to that risk level.
Okay.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The research suggests using blockchain to create like a decentralized and transparent system for this.
Okay, wait. So we're talking about using blockchain to like keep the AI in check.
You got it.
How would that even work?
Okay, so imagine like a global registry for AI agents that's built on a blockchain.
Okay.
And every AI agent would have like this digital passport that contains information about like its capabilities, its risk level, the ethical guidelines it's programmed to follow, its track record.
So instead of relying on companies to like self-regulate, we would have this like public tamper-proof record of how AI agents are actually behaving
out in the wild,
out in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. So like anyone could audit the system, to see if an AI agent is actually operating within like the agreed upon ethical boundaries. And if it violates those rules, there could be consequences like being shut down or like having its access to data restricted. Okay,
that's a pretty like radical idea. But I can see how it could address some of the concerns people have about like AI becoming too powerful or uncontrollable.
Exactly.
But wouldn't this system require like a lot of global cooperation to actually work?
It would. And that's like one of the biggest challenges here. Getting everyone on the same page about like AI ethics and governance is no easy feat.
Right.
But the research actually suggests that blockchain could facilitate this global collaboration by providing like a neutral and transparent platform for like discussions and decision making.
That's a hopeful thought.
It is.
But before we get too deep into like global AI governance, I want to like circle back to something you said earlier. About the potential clash between like the centralized nature of like AI development and the decentralized spirit of blockchain. Can you like unpack that a little bit more?
Sure. So, you know, as we discussed, AI development often requires these massive data sets and tons of computing power. And that tends to like concentrate power in the hands of like a few large tech companies.
Right.
But the beauty of blockchain is that it can be used to create more decentralized models for AI development.
Okay.
You know, like that open source approach we talked about earlier.
Right. So instead of having a few companies that control all the AI, we could have a more like distributed and collaborative ecosystem.
Exactly. And blockchain can be used to like incentivize participation in this ecosystem.
How so?
So think about like platforms where people can contribute data or like computing power to train AI models and then get rewarded with like tokens or cryptocurrency.
Okay, so it's like almost like it's like a reward system for like helping to train the AI.
It is,
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are challenges to like making this work in practice.
Of course. Like scalability is a big one. Right. Can these decentralized systems actually handle the massive amounts of data, the processing power required for these like complex AI tasks? And then there's the question of governance, right? Like how do you manage, coordinate this like large-scale decentralized AI project?
It sounds like there's still a lot to figure out.
But it's clear that this intersection of blockchain and AI is like one of the most exciting and potentially like transformative areas in technology today.
It is. It's really cool. But before we like, you know, keep going down this road of like future predictions, I think it's time we shifted our focus to like the listener and like how they can navigate.
What does this mean for you?
This crazy landscape.
Exactly.
All right, welcome back to the show. So we've covered like a lot of ground here.
We have.
From like, you know, the nuts and bolts of blockchain.
Technical stuff.
To like the crazy possibilities of AI. But I want to talk about like how this is all playing out in the real world.
Yeah.
Like, are there actual like examples of of decentralization making a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely, yeah. And the exciting thing is we're seeing real-world applications popping up in, like, all sorts of unexpected places. Remember when we were talking about, like, smart contracts?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, can I buy a house with this?
Yeah.
So those aren't just a futuristic concept. They're being used right now to streamline everything from, like, supply chains to real estate deals.
Okay, so give me an example.
Yeah.
Like, how are smart contracts actually being used to improve things?
Okay, so let's take, like, supply chain management.
Okay.
It's, like, notoriously complex, right?
Yeah.
Lots of moving parts, lots of opportunities for things to go wrong. But imagine a system where, like, the journey of a product, say, like, a coffee bean, is tracked on a blockchain from, like, the farm where it's grown all the way to the cup you drink it from.
Okay, so, like, every step of the way, from, like, shipping to storage to distribution is, like, recorded on this blockchain.
It's all right there.
Creating this permanent, transparent record.
Exactly. And because it's on a blockchain, it's tamper-proof, right? So no more, like, shady dealings or, like, lost shipments, you know?
Right.
Consumers can have more confidence knowing where their products are coming from.
Right.
Businesses can reduce waste and fraud.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that could, like, benefit everyone.
I think so, yeah.
Both companies and consumers.
Yeah.
Okay, what about those real estate deals that you were talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Like, how are smart contracts disrupting that industry?
Yeah, so the research actually mentions a platform called Propy, and this platform is already facilitating, like, property transactions using blockchain tech and smart contracts.
Okay.
So think about, like, all the paperwork back and forth involved in buying or selling a house.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
It's a slow process.
It is.
Often frustrating.
Very frustrating.
I know you just bought a house.
I did, yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, it felt like I was signing my life away on, like, 1,000 different documents.
Exactly. But with a platform like Propy, a lot of those steps can be automated.
Okay.
So the terms of the sale are coded into the smart contract.
Right.
And once those conditions are met, like the buyer's financing's approved, the title search is clear. The funds are automatically transferred.
Wow.
The ownership is recorded on the blockchain.
So it's like a self-executing escrow service.
Yeah, you could think of it like that.
But without, like, a third party.
Right, exactly.
Wow, so this could potentially save both the buyer and the seller a ton of, like, time and money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, like, make the whole process more efficient and transparent.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how blockchain is having, like, a tangible impact beyond just, like, the world of cryptocurrency.
It's going mainstream.
It is.
That's happening.
Yeah. So what about the financial industry itself?
Right.
You mentioned this thing called DeFi earlier.
Yes.
How is that changing things?
Yeah, so DeFi, or decentralized finance, is essentially about cutting out the traditional financial middlemen.
Okay, so, like,
banks, brokers, payment processors, all that.
Yeah, and replacing them with
blockchain-based platform.
So it's like taking Wall Street and putting it on the blockchain.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the, like, key features of DeFi is the ability to, like, lend and borrow money without going through a bank. So imagine being able to, like, connect directly with someone who wants to lend you money.
Okay.
Agree on the terms using a smart contract.
Right.
And have that whole transaction recorded securely on the blockchain.
So it's like peer-to-peer lending.
Yeah.
But with the added security and transparency of blockchain.
You got it.
I've also heard about, like, people earning interest on their, like, crypto holdings.
Yeah.
Through these DeFi platforms.
Right.
How does that work?
So that's called yield farming.
Yield farming.
Yeah, it's kind of a buzzy term.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most, like, popular applications in DeFi.
Okay.
So you're essentially depositing your cryptocurrency into this thing called a liquidity pool, which is used to, like, facilitate the lending and borrowing on the platform.
Right.
And you earn a return. Based on, like, the interest rates.
It sounds like a high-tech savings account.
Yeah.
But with potentially, like, higher returns.
Yeah, potentially much higher.
But is it safe?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely risks involved.
Okay.
I mean, these platforms are still relatively new.
Right.
The regulatory landscape is, like, still evolving.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there.
Kinda. But, the transparency of blockchain does allow you to see exactly what's happening with your money and how the platform's operating.
So do your research.
Do your research.
Understand the risks.
Understand the risks.
Before you, jump in.
Exactly. Like any investment, really.
Okay, that's good advice.
Yeah.
What about, the broader implications of DeFi?
Right.
Could it actually, challenge the dominance of, these big financial institutions?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it's really too early to say for sure.
Okay.
But DeFi is definitely shaking things up.
Okay.
It's forcing the traditional players to, innovate.
Okay.
I mean, some banks are even starting to experiment with blockchain technology themselves.
It's like that saying, if you can't beat them, join them.
Exactly.
Okay, so beyond the financial world,
yeah,
what other areas are being, disrupted by blockchain?
Right.
We touched on the potential for, blockchain-based, digital identity.
Mm-hmm.
What's, the latest on that front?
Yeah, so digital identity is one of the most, promising areas for blockchain application, I think.
Okay.
Think about all the sensitive, personal information we share online.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
From, our social security numbers to our health records,
Scary to think about.
It is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But with, a blockchain-based identity system, individuals could have so much more control over this data.
Right.
Choosing what to share, with whom.
So it's like having a digital passport.
Right.
But you control it.
You control it.
Instead of it being, spread out across all these different, databases owned by companies.
Right.
And
governments.
Yeah.
Okay. This could have huge implications for, everything.
Huge, yeah. Healthcare, online commerce.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a world where you can verify your identity without having to, provide physical documents.
Right.
Or trust a third party to keep your information secure.
Right. Yeah. That sounds like a game changer.
It is, yeah.
So what about the role of AI in all of this?
Right.
We talked about, the potential for decentralized AI.
Mm-hmm.
But are there any, real-world examples of that happening yet?
There are a few, really exciting developments.
Okay.
One area where we're seeing a lot of progress is in, healthcare.
Okay.
So AI is being used to, analyze medical images, diagnose diseases, even develop, personalized treatment plans.
Wow.
But there are, legitimate concerns about data privacy and the potential for bias in these algorithms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
That's where blockchain can come in, right?
Right.
To ensure that the data that's used to train these AI systems is secure. Ethically sourced.
Okay.
So one project that's mentioned in the research is actually using blockchain to create a decentralized network for sharing medical data.
Okay.
So individuals have more control over their health information.
Right.
But researchers can still access anonymized data to train the AI algorithms.
So it's finding that balance between privacy and progress.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And we're seeing similar collaborations between blockchain and AI in other fields too, from environmental monitoring to supply chain transparency.
So the potential for these two technologies to work together to create a more equitable and sustainable world,
I think so,
is pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really inspiring to hear about all these real world applications.
Yeah. It makes all this talk about decentralization and blockchain feel much more tangible and impactful.
For sure.
But this is just the beginning.
Yeah, this is just the start.
What does the future hold for these technologies?
Right.
And what can our listeners do to prepare for this decentralized world that's emerging?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, no one really knows for sure what the future holds.
Right.
But the research suggests that the trends we're seeing, this shift towards decentralization, the rise of blockchain and AI, this growing demand for data privacy and ownership, these things are only going to accelerate. In the coming years.
So what's your advice to our listeners? How can they navigate this rapidly evolving landscape?
I think the most important thing is to just stay curious and informed.
Stay informed.
Keep learning. Keep exploring.
Keep experimenting.
Okay.
Like, don't be afraid to, like, dip your toes into the world of, like, blockchain, cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Engage with the communities, the discussions that are happening around these topics.
So it's about being, like, an active participant.
Yeah.
In shaping this future, not just a passive observer.
Exactly. The future isn't something that just like happens to us. It's something that we create together.
I like that.
And the more informed and engaged we are, the better equipped we'll be to build a future that benefits everyone.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
On this deep dive into the world of decentralization,
absolutely,
blockchain, AI, hopefully everybody listening, you gain some valuable insights.
Yeah.
And you're as excited as we are about the possibilities that lie ahead.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating time to be alive.
It is. And to be following this technology.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show.